Good afternoon and welcome to the Oklahoma City Planning Commission. Before we begin our meeting, just want to do a few housekeeping reminders. Please remember to silence your cell phones at this time. Please remember, if you'd like to address the commission, that there are some forms that look just like this that our staff have. Either, do you have them, or are they outside? They're outside at the table in the front. Please fill those out if you want to be heard on any of the items here. Please remember that you'll have 5 minutes to address the commission. We do reserve the right to limit any repetitious comments. I'd also ask, if you're here with a group, that you elect a spokesperson to really represent all of the views of the group, so that we can respect everyone's time here. The key rule to all that we do, how we operate on this commission, is just the golden rule. Let's be respectful of each other. Let's be respectful of the process. And so I think we are ready to begin. Let's start with the receipt of the minutes from the October 13th, 2022 meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I move we receive the minutes.
Commissioner, was it Hinkle moved? I didn't even look. I should have looked. Commissioner Hinkle moved to receive the minutes from the October 13th meeting. Seconded by Commissioner Privet. Please cast your votes when available.
Commissioner Powers, what say you?
She is absent. And the motion passes. We are now in line for continuance requests, and beginning with uncontested continuance requests.
Item 4B22, SPUD 1451, deferred to November 10th. Item 23, case C7476, deferred to November 10th. Item 24, case C7480, deferred to November 10th. And item 25, case CE1075, diverted to December 8th.
Is there anyone here who wanted to be heard on any of those 4 items? Seeing none, I think we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move approval of the uncontested requests.
Commissioner Hinkle has moved approval of the uncontested continuance requests as read. Let's see if there's a second.
Still waiting.
Still waiting.
There we go.
It's been seconded by Commissioner Privet. Please cast your votes when available. And the motion passes. We're now in line for new continuance requests.
Item 15 is PUD 1913. It has been withdrawn. And item 19, case PC 10841, deferred to December 8th.
Is there anyone here wishing to be heard on either of those 2 items? Seeing none, we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move approval of the new requests as read.
Commissioner Hinkle has moved approval of the continuance requests as read. It's been seconded by Commissioner LaForge. Please cast your votes when available. And the motion passes. We're now in line for the consent docket.
Item 1 is case C7483, final plat of Thompson's Macombo, located west of or south of Northeast 50th Street and west of North Kelly Avenue. Item 2, case C7495, final plat of Sanabria Phase 1, located north of Southwest 164th Street and west of South Pennsylvania. Item 3, case C7496, final plat of 112 Industrial, located north of West Hefner Road and west of Northwestern Avenue. And that's it.
Excellent. And I do know I'm going to ask that we remove item 1 from the consent docket, because I do know that there are people wishing to be heard on that item. But is there anyone else wishing to be heard on any of the other 4 items, any of the other 3 items on the consent docket? Seeing none, I think we're ready to approve the amended consent docket.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the consent docket, removing item 1.
The motion before the commission is to approve the consent docket except for item 1. It's been seconded by Commissioner Govine. Please cast your votes when available. And the motion passes. We're in line for item 1.
Good afternoon, Mark Zitzow with Johnson & Associates on behalf of the applicant. This is a final plat that seeks to allow the creation of 4 new lots. The property is currently zoned R1 single family, so we meet the minimum lot size requirements. It'll be served by public water and private sewer systems. I did just speak to our neighbor to the north, and we discussed tree preservation and some other things that we're taking into account on this project. So I know they're here, they may have additional questions for you. But it is a final plat, staff has reviewed it and recommended approval, and we would ask for your approval today.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission? Any questions from commissioners? I think we're ready for any comments or questions from the public.
Mr. Chairman, my questions have been
Oh, please come to the podium, sir. And give us your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Tom Chandler. I own the property immediately north of that property. And I had questions, and the engineer answered my questions prior to the meeting. Thank
Excellent.
you.
To your satisfaction, I hope.
I'm sorry?
To your satisfaction, he answered
Yes.
those questions, I hope. Okay, good. Well, that's great. Is there anyone else wishing to be heard on this item, item number 1? Any questions or comments from commissioners? This is Ward 7, and I do approve. So, I think we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move approval of item C 7483.
Commissioner Hinkle moves approval of C 7483. It's been seconded by Commissioner LaForge. Please cast your votes when available.
There were some TEs too, but they're pretty standard.
Yes, and that includes including the TEs.
Commissioner Noble, what say you?
Commissioner Noble votes yes. Okay, and that is approved. We're now in line for item 5.
Item 4?
Oh, 4. Excuse me. I said 5. 4.
4 wasn't continued, was it?
No, I think I just skipped. Sorry.
Okay, item 4 is PUD 1770 SPO1, application for a specific plan pursuant to the approval of PUD 1770 located at 8300 Broadway Extension.
Good afternoon, Mark Zitzow with Johnson & Associates. This is a specific plan within what is known as the Half Development at 9000 Broadway. It is immediately south of a new rehab hospital that's been built, and if you were to look to the east, you're going to see the new DeLisi headquarters and Chicken and Pickle. This is a new office building that is coming online, and there will be room for an additional building to our south. That, of course, will come back with a separate specific plan. Staff has reviewed it, found it in conformance with the PUD regulations, so we would ask for your approval.
Thank you. And this is in my ward also. And I am in support and very excited about all of the development that's continuing to go along the Broadway extension. I think it's great. Glad to see it, the pictures in color too. That's awesome. Any questions from commissioners? Is there anyone in the audience wishing to be heard on this item? Seeing none, I think we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll move approval of PUD 1770 SPO1. Did it have technical evaluation?
Commissioner Hinkle moves to recommend approval of the specific plan for PUD 1770. It's been,
Specific plan.
let's see if there's a second. Second from Commissioner DeGovine. Please cast your votes when available. And the motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're ready for item 5.
Item 5 is case C-7497, preliminary plat of Echo Park Phases 2, 3, and 4, located north of Northwest 150th Street and east of North MacArthur Boulevard.
Good afternoon, Dean Kalidas, Civil and Environmental Consultants, representing the applicant. On this property here, this was a preliminary plat that was approved back in January of last year. Our client was able to assemble some property to the east to kind of add on to this, so we basically just went in and added that property and reconfigured some lots. The first phase is actually under construction. The final plat's already been approved and filed. So that's kind of where the grayed out area is. So this is kind of the conditions of the rest of the property. We meet the comp plan. We're providing connection stubs to the north, the south, and to the west. The east is a drainage channel and pond, so we don't have a connection there, but we are providing connectivity throughout the area. So, we agree to all the TEs, so if you got any questions, be happy to answer them.
Thank you. And before we hear any questions from the commission, I'm going to ask Barry to speak to an issue about this as well.
Barry Lodge, Oklahoma City Public Works. We would like to have one TE added to the staff report, and that would be to remove, I believe it's note number 8 on the preliminary plat that states that detention will not be required for this development. So that's in conflict with the staff report where we make the comment that detention determinations will not be made at the preliminary plat stage. I spoke with Mr. Kalita before the meeting started. He indicated he would be in agreement with that. So if we can get that added into the, as a T onto the staff report also.
And could you give me that language one more time?
Excuse me?
Could you give me the language one more time that you'd like the TE, how you'd like it to read?
Note number 8 stating that detention will not be required for this development will be removed from the preliminary plat.
Yeah, we agree to that.
Cool. This is Ward 8. Commissioner Noble, would you like to lead our discussion?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with what it is. It's just a continuation of the plats that existed. I don't know if there's anyone here to speak on it.
Is there anyone in the audience wishing to be heard on item 5, C7479?
Doesn't look like it. I'm ready to make a motion.
And are you good on the TE
And
language too?
yeah,
Okay.
so should we add a TE or should we just strike the note?
I think the TE is to strike the note.
Okay. So recommend approval of case number C7497 with the, 6 TEs?
Yep. So the 6 TE to strike the note number 8 regarding detention. The motion before the commission is to approve C7479 with the added TE as read into the record. It's been seconded by Commissioner Hinkle. Please cast your votes when available. The motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're ready for item 6.
This is case C7494, preliminary plat of the community at Survey Plaza, located north of Northwest Expressway and east of North Mustang Road.
Good afternoon, Mark Zitzow with Johnson & Associates, 1 East Sheridan Avenue. This is a preliminary plat for a property that was zoned last year. The site plan is almost identical. It is for 12 duplex lots. One thing to note, we have made sure that our cul-de-sac, which is a public street, was extended far enough to our east to allow for the church to take access to that and to take access off that in the future. Staff has reviewed it. We are in agreement with the TEs, and we would ask for your approval.
Thank you. This is in Ward 1, and I know that we don't have Commissioner Clayer here today, but any questions from commissioners on this item? Is there anyone in the audience wishing to be heard on item 6, C7494? Seeing none, we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll move approval of C7494
Commi-
with the TEs.
Commissioner Hinkle moves approval of C7494, including all of the TEs as written. And we're gonna hopefully have there we go. And it's seconded by Commissioner Privet. Please cast your votes when available. And the motion passes. We're
Thank
now
you.
in line for item 7.
This is case CE 1081, application to close a portion of Classen Boulevard between Block 10 of the Classen's Marquette Edition and Block 11 of the amended Classen's Marquette Edition, located south of Northwest 11th Street and east of Dewey Avenue at 1111 Classen Drive.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. Also with me is Mark Zitzow, who's serving as an easel this afternoon for us. So this is a closing application for the stretch of Classen Drive that extends from the roundabout at 10th Street to where it intersects with 11th Street. This actually is an application that went to the Downtown Design Review Committee yesterday first for a recommendation, and they did recommend approval. When we started this process, we first went and met with Public Works, Planning, to see what their thoughts were going to be, because what our hope is, let's turn that around, sorry. It's better when the easel doesn't think. Our thought was that we had an opportunity to create a really nice, usable pedestrian experience right here in kind of the center of Midtown. And if you ever go to Midtown, Midtown doesn't really have kind of a center or heart, for lack of a better word. And our hope is that this provides it. And it's actually a joint project with the folks that own the Plaza Court building, and then Mr. Farha, who owns what was the IMSA building that has since been demolished. So one of the concerns that staff had was, of course, when you close that down, what does it look like from a street vehicular access standpoint? And so Johnson Associates did do a traffic study, and it did reflect that the traffic counts on that are very low. So what is a concern is how would this disrupt the traffic pattern? So what this exhibit shows us is the grid network is completely intact in this part of downtown. So closing Classen Drive through that one block does not really affect it, because there are multiple ways to get any direction you seek to go, whether that's south, east, west, or north. It's really just impacting these two developments. Of course, the two developers are here before you asking for this. Now, staff did, in the staff report, ask for a bike and pedestrian easement at least 20 feet in width to be provided along the existing street alignment, which we agreed to. Jared, could you go back a couple images? Our hope here is that it becomes a pedestrian plaza that, let's show you those exhibits. Yes, if you could go back to the PowerPoint, sorry. There you go. So these are some examples that we have from Seattle. So our hope is, because downtown, of course, our goal is to have a walkable pedestrian environment, that this will allow us to do that by keeping it open for pedestrians and bikes. I think it's going to accomplish all those goals. In the staff report to the DDRC, staff makes the point that the usability of the current intersection and Dewey is anticipated to improve because of the removal of the vehicular traffic from the spoke of the intersection. If you're familiar with that intersection at all, you'll know that when you get to the end of Classen Drive at 11th, it is an awkward intersection because it's a 5-spoke intersection. And oftentimes you will have cars making a right turn on red that they think is permitted, that's really not permitted because you're crossing multiple lanes of traffic. Also, the streetcar goes through here. So we think this actually creates a more urban environment, and which is what, of course, the goal of the DDRC regulations are geared towards. So, in closing, 2 TEs, we agree with it. The DDRC did recommend approval as well, and we're asking for your recommendation for approval too.
Thank you. This is in Ward 6. Commissioner Govine, would you like to lead our discussion?
Sure. Well, I've met with the applicants and have gotten familiar with the project, which I think is a great proposal, in fact. Is there anyone here to speak on this item today? Take that as a no?
Yep.
Are there any questions from other commissioners?
I've already told Mr. Vox that I travel this route frequently, and I do have some heartburn about the closure, but my real concern or question about it really is to legal. You know, in the past, we have had the opinion from legal that if something is closed by the city, they have basically foregone their right to object to it being vacated. And I'd like to hear about that. As I understand it, what we're really doing is closing this to vehicular traffic, not closing it to public use.
Correct, that is my understanding.
And so I would like to hear more about that.
That is correct. When we close it, we still reserve the right to reopen at some point, or all of our utilities are reserved until we get to the vacation stage at district court. And at that point, then we would reserve easements for any utilities. But here we're just closing it to vehicular traffic and not to pedestrian or.
And is that specified in the closure, that it's being closed only to vehicular traffic?
I think we would probably do that, put that language in the closing ordinance itself.
But does that intention need to be included in the recommendation from the commission?
Right, I think that's what they're asking.
It's there in the
Yeah,
TE.
the
And
TE.
it'll also be, at the time of the journal entry, when we're at district court, there are 3 separate bits of infrastructure. You've got a sewer line, I think a fire line, and then OG&E has infrastructure in there. So all of those will be reserved, because we're not going to be building on that 20-foot strip, right? So in the journal entry, we will make sure that it is still open to the public and reserved for pedestrian, bike, and also whatever infrastructure is in there.
Okay.
Any other questions from commissioners? I think we're ready, Commissioner Govine.
I would, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move to approve C7494 with the 4 TEs as stated.
Commissioner Govine moves to recommend approval of CE 1081 to City Council.
He was reading the last one.
2 TEs.
Oh,
You said 7494.
I said the wrong one.
Am I on the
Sorry.
wrong?
No, you're at the right one.
I said the wrong one.
1081 is the right one.
Oh, okay.
I'm
2
sorry.
TEs.
And the two, and including the 2 TEs for CE 1081.
Wrong page here.
All good. Commissioner Hinkle's on it. He caught it. Shouldn't you just make the motion on the, did you press the button? There we go. And it's been seconded by Commissioner Privet. Please cast your votes when available. And the motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're now in line for item 8.
This is case CE 1085, application to close all of the 20-foot West Allen Block 2 of the Edwards Courthouse Addition, located south of West Reno Avenue and east of South Lee Avenue.
Good afternoon, Mark Zitza with Johnson & Associates. Address is 1 East Sheridan Avenue. This is a unique property in that the property to our immediate east was never platted, which is rare in downtown to find property that has not been platted. Because of that, this alley dead ends and does not continue on its way through the block. So any turnaround for trash or access is not feasible because it's only 20 feet in width. This went to the DDRC committee yesterday. They've recommended approval. We are asking for your recommendation as well today, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
And this is also in Ward 6. Commissioner Govine, would you like to lead our discussion?
Sure. I was reviewing this and was the note says the applicant has stated that the alley closure is requested to allow the owner to develop the property to the north as planned. What is planned there?
Sure, so there'll be a future application to the DDRC committee to review that, but right now it's proposed as an office building with a parking lot. And so because of the dimensions and this easement where it's at, the goal is we'll reserve the sewer easement and the OG&E easement, but we're seeking to bury the electric so that we can move the parking lot further closer to the south property line. And that allows the building to fit a little bit better, to be a little bit more functional. And so we've agreed through the DDRC report that when we come back, all of the back of house operations, if you will, the trash, if there's any sort of garage doors or access, will all take place on the back side of the property.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't have further questions, I think. Basically, I'm curious if any other commissioners have any thoughts or comments on this. I recognize that this easement does not continue through to the east. It seems to make sense for the development. I've had experience with projects just like this, so I would be prepared to move for approval unless there's any other concerns or thoughts that need to be discussed.
Let's see if there's anyone who wants to be heard on this item. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to be heard on this item, item 8, CE 1085? Seeing none, I think we're ready.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I move approval of item CE 1085. Hopefully I got that right this time, with the 1 TE.
And Commissioner Govine moves we recommend approval of CE 1085 to City Council. It's been seconded by Commissioner Noble. Please cast your votes when available. And the motion passes. Thank you. Now in line for item 9.
Item 9 is case PC 10847, application to rezone 2904 Northwest 13th Street from R1 to C1.
Is there an applicant present? Is there an applicant present for PC 10847? Seeing none, why don't we move this to the end of the agenda? And if someone doesn't mind making that motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to move item 9 to the end of the agenda today.
Commissioner Commissioner Govine has moved to move item 9 to the end of the agenda. Is there a second? I know we're adding new motions in here. Okay, he was ready too.
There it is.
It's been seconded by Commissioner LaForge. Please cast your votes on available. The motion passes. We're in line for item 10.
This is case PC 10848, application to rezone 4400 Northwest Expressway from R1 to C3.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mark Long. I'm with Smith Roberts Baldesweiler, representing the applicant. Also with me today here is John Middledorf, who's the pastor of First Church of the Nazarene. This is a request to change the zoning from R1 to C3. The First Church of the Nazarene has been operating here for almost 50 years. This request is prompted by the fact that they operate a community center as part of their church. That community center is available with a kitchen as part of state health department requirements and city permit requirements. If they're still zoned R1, they cannot have a commercial catering operation use the kitchen to serve the use of the community center. By changing this zoning, it will allow them to conform to the state health department and the city permit requirements for being able to have a commercial caterer within the community center part of the church. The surrounding zoning is compatible, mostly C3, and then there is some office as well.
Thank you.
That I can answer any questions.
Thank you. This is Ward 2. Commissioner Powers, would you like to lead our discussion?
Yes, I've already warned Pastor Middendorf that he may hear a collective gasp when I move for approval of this item. The disproportionality of 6 acres of C3 zoning for a commercial kitchen lease seemed really startling to me at first, but after really looking at the property, going out there, looking at the surrounding area, I'm much, much more comfortable with this idea. Their church occupies this entire site. So this is, and it's a very substantial building or buildings. It's not something that's going to be scraped and built over. Also, there are residential properties both to the west and kind of to the southwest. There are apartments and condos, but there is really heavy, dense screening, vegetation, and a creek between this property and those. There's only one little piece of this puzzle that would be troubling if it were going to be used for C3. And C3, it allows so many things that you would really kind of anywhere close to even R4 kind of residential. But there's really only one small strip there that where this property abuts property to the south that is residential R4. And it has only a cyclone fence between them. But if there is any kind of actual commercial use incorporated, I should say built onto this property, then that'll have to be made into a site-proof screen. So, and it's higher property, and I think that's really just not very much of an issue here. So, unless there's somebody here that wants to be heard on this item, or unless some of you have questions, I'm ready to move, so.
Any questions from commissioners on item 10? Anyone in the audience wishing to be heard on item 10, PC 10848?
I'm going to move approval of item number 10, PC 10848.
Commissioner Powers moves to recommend approval of PC 10848 to City Council. It's been seconded by Commissioner Hinkle. Please cast your votes when available. Commissioner Hinkle votes yes. And the motion passes.
Thank you.
We're ready for item 11.
This is case SPUD 1458, application to rezone 11600 Ecker Drive from AA and RA2 to SPUD 1458.
Mark Grubbs, 1800 South Sarah Road, on behalf of the applicant. This is a SPUD to allow for this property to be split into two. It'll allow for a minimum size of 2-acre tracts and to front onto Ecker. We recently did another one just to the north and west, I think last year, this same exact thing. So, and it was the same client, and staff recommends approval. We would ask for your approval and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. This is in Ward 7. I have no questions and I'm in full support. Any questions from commissioners? Anyone in the audience wishing to be heard on this item? SPUD 1458. If I could make the motion, I would.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move approval of SPUD 1458.
Thank you. Commissioner Hinkle moves to recommend approval of SPUD 1458 to City Council. It's been seconded by Commissioner Govine. Please cast your votes when available. And the motion passes. Thank you. We're in line for item 12.
This is SPUD 1459, application to rezone 10036 Northwest 4th Street from AA to SPUD 1459.
I'm Sarah Fleming with Keller Williams Realty, address 3421 West Rock Creek Road. I'm representing the applicant. We're asking that this property be rezoned from agricultural to the SPUD. It was originally an 80-acre tract. 79 acres was sold to a developer, and now the applicant, and we need to rezone it in order to sell it.
Okay. Thank you. This is in Ward 1 again. I guess we're really missing Commissioner Clare, but are there any questions from commissioners on this item?
Yeah, pretty sure we at the BOA punted this to us, so, yeah.
So
it's a little big of a variance, but definitely makes more sense as SPUD. I've got no issues with it. At BOA issues, but not here. Good.
That's good. Any other questions from commissioners? No. Anyone wishing to be heard on this item, SPUD 1459? Seeing none, I think we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move approval of SPUD 1459.
Commissioner Hinkle moves to recommend approval of SPUD 1459 to City Council. Let's see. And it's been seconded by Commissioner Govine. Please cast your votes when available. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion passes. We're in line for item 13.
This is SPUD 1448, application to rezone 25 Southwest 50th Street from R2 to SPUD 1448.
Good afternoon, once again, David Box. This is an SPUD that would allow for both duplex and single family. You see that creek, it would divide the parcel to single family on the west, duplex on the east. It's consistent with what it is now. It's just we're gonna be able to, through design, get, I believe, a few more lots than otherwise. We could get under straight R2. There is one TE that we agree to. There was heavy discussion, of course, last meeting on the merits of private drives versus public streets. So the staff has asked that we agree to build either private or public, but build them to city standards, which we've agreed to do so.
Great. This is in Ward 4. Commissioner Privet.
Right here. My chair's trying to send me out. Okay.
Technical difficulties up here today.
Yeah, I kind of like this development actually, and with the single family being on the west, that definitely helps. And to the north is, mobile home park, so I'm good with it.
Any questions from commissioners? Anyone in the audience wishing to be heard on this item, SPUD 1448? Seeing none, Commissioner Privet.
I'll move to approve SPUD, 1448 with the 1 TE.
Commissioner Privet moves to recommend approval of SPUD 1448 to City Council with the included TE. It's been seconded by Commissioner Hinkle. Please cast your votes when available.
Thank you.
Thank you, and the motion passes. We're in line for item 14.
Item 14 is case SPUD 1454, application to rezone 1417 North Blackwelder Avenue from R2.
Good afternoon, Mark Zitzow with Johnson & Associates, address is 1 East Sheridan Avenue. Before you is what I believe to be a pretty exciting project in the Classon 10 Penn neighborhood. Prior to submittal of the application, we hosted a neighborhood meeting. Representatives from Classon 10 Penn and the Plaza District were present. We walked through our application and the case. They expressed no concern. I'm not sure if anybody's here today. But when you think about Blackwelder is becoming, I think, quite an interesting urban spine connecting Northwest 10th to 16th Street. Historically, Blackwelder had multifamily projects on it, but in recent years, new developments such as the Blackwelder cottages and live-work units have recently been renovated or newly constructed. And so what you're seeing now is more on-street parking, new sidewalks, and I think ultimately, again, creating just a solid urban spine in 10 Penn. So when we looked at this project and figured out how to do a site plan and unit counts, we looked at what our surrounds were. And the homes to our south, Jared, if you can go to the map, there are 3 single-family homes there, and you can see that our solid black line is the property line. They are all at or within 5 feet of the property line. So we felt it gave us a unique opportunity here to be a little bit aggressive, but again, I think it is still in line with what we've seen develop on Blackwelder. So what we've proposed is 59 units with 1 space per unit provided for parking. That is all outlined in the SPUD. Staff has recommended approval subject to 2 TEs. The first one being that the setback along Blackwelder shall be 10 feet. We disagree with this primarily because the homes to our south are at most around 5 feet from the property line. So when we think about compatibility and trying to be close, I think that's always the goal, is that it is within the realm of what the existing setbacks are. Typically in a single-family neighborhood, you see those setbacks at 20 or 25 feet. In this particular location, that's not where we're at. We are still set back further from the sidewalk, of course, which I think in this case is what was a little bit deceiving. Typically, that property line is going to be at the back of the sidewalk. Here, Blackwelder just had a larger right-of-way. I think that's why we ended up with a much narrower setback on the existing homes. So we are asking for that. We have language in the SPUD that we've included that we would seek to keep, which is the setback along Blackwelder is 3 feet, which is generally in line with the existing structures, except that the building on the hard corner may be placed at the property line. Again, I think when we look at infill development, I think the standard has always been kind of at or within 5 feet of the existing established setback line. I don't know that really any street in the core, every house is set exactly the same distance back. So we feel that being at that 3 feet to 0 feet on the hard corner was appropriate. The second TE, staff sought to restrict the dwelling units for the SPUD to 36. We're in agreement to bring the dwelling units down, but I think the struggle that we have with urban infill development and looking at dwelling units per acre as the basis for compatibility is if the site plan is compatible and the setbacks are compatible and the parking count is met, I think that's ultimately what dictates the compatibility of units within the neighborhood. So in this case, we achieved 59 units. Again, we're willing to come down on that number slightly, maybe to 53 to 55 units. But we do believe that the site plan as a whole is compatible, and that's what should drive the unit count. If we agreed to 36 units for the property, nothing would restrict us from doing 36 2-bedroom units and ultimately having more bedrooms and more cars than what we'd be permitted today. So with that, we would ask for your approval with the amendments to the TEs. The first one, striking TE1, and the second one, I guess having a discussion on what that slight reduction in density looks like.
Thank you. Commissioner Govine, this is in your ward. Would you like to begin our discussion?
Sure. We haven't discussed, I want to discuss the number of stories I think has been resolved through staff, which is noted on your site plan. So having met with the applicant, there's been a lot of background work done on this to get this adjacencies to other residences to work and where things are allowed to be 2 stories and 3 stories. So having taken that into consideration and looked at your desired unit counts and discussing that, I think 53 units is the maximum that works on this site from a density point of view. So I think that's a good compromise from where you'd like to be to where staff wants you to be on the 53 count. So that's one topic that we can have further discussion on and make sure there's a consensus there. The setback, I think I think the intent is the same, is that you're not trying to go further than the existing residences. The 0 lot line setback on the corner, that's a new one to me that I'm hearing now. So can you explain that a little bit better as to how that would work? And you're asking to remove TE1. Is there more specificity we could get with that, where it might be a certain distance, on the, I can understand hugging the corner. That does make some sense, and in this neighborhood, I believe it would as well with some of the other multifamilies.
Right, so I think the intent was that if we're gonna kind of put that taller 3-story structure in a more urban setting, we would bring that up to the property line. And so we're seeking flexibility. Obviously, the site plan is still a little bit in flux. But I think we would like the ability to go to the property line, given that the other structures that exist on the block are set back at most 5 feet. So we're still within what I would consider a comfortable range of compatibility on a block face. And then we are stepping our structure height down, which you noted. So when we're adjacent to the single-story, single-family residential, we have 2-story structures, which is noted in the SPUD language, and we're stepping up as we go toward the corner.
Mm-hmm. So is there a way that we can define, it's a 5-foot setback, except within 100 feet of the corner, it's allowed to be a 0-foot setback, or something to that effect? I don't know if that's the right words, but.
Sounds like the existing language about the corner is probably fine. The existing language in the at least what's written in our staff report.
That's correct. So the setback for Blackwelder Avenue is 3 feet, which is generally in line with the existing structures, except that the building on the hard corner of Northwest 14th and Blackwelder shall be permitted to be located on the property line as shown on the site plan. And what we're referring to on the site plan is you can kind of see there's that patio edge that is created. So if that ends up being a patio or a building extension, that's the area we would like to have that 0-foot setback. And it's only on that one building on the hard corner.
Okay.
Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. I didn't see that language actually in what I had in front of me here. So, but that is clear enough, I believe. Are there other comments, questions from other commissioners on this one?
To be fair, and open about this, I did ask Mark about this right before the meeting started. Is there better language that we can use to be assured that the setback will be appropriate and comparable to the other buildings nearby? We couldn't come to a consensus in that 2-minute conversation, but would certainly love to hear other thoughts from commissioners about that. I'm looking over
Kind of where I was going with it too, but
looking over at Commissioner Powers, who's seen these a time or two.
How I always think about it is the maintenance of the visual setback, right? I'm not sure that that's a particularly useful phrase to put it into black and white in text. This was a question that I asked specifically of the applicant, whether that would be maintained. 0 to 5 is a little bit more wiggle room than I'm comfortable with, frankly. this is such an odd thing, and it's hard when you're looking at a drawing like this, both in terms of the amount of density that we're talking about and in terms of this visual setback. I want to be very clear, you know, God forbid something happens, these people go bankrupt or get hit by trucks and somebody else ends up developing the property. And, you know, I want to be clear that what is on the lot does in fact maintain or simulate the visual setback along Black Welder. And I hate it that we don't have a better way of dealing with the dwelling unit thing, because of course it's really the number of people, bedrooms being maybe the default, I don't know, and parking, you know. If we say, okay, well, we'll go with 53 dwelling units, there's absolutely nothing to prevent them from building 53 three-bedroom dwelling units. That's way more density than would work on this site, in my view. I say there's nothing. I guess the parking lot ratio would limit that.
That'd be correct. So, I mean, the way the site plan is laid out is all of the units are, for the most part, the majority of them are one bed and efficiency units. So in order for those to be converted into 3 beds, the units would have to come down because we're still required 1 space per unit. So I don't know that there's a way that we could go from 53 kind of efficiency type of apartments all the way up to 53 3 beds.
So height
and have
and
this
parking really kind of.
Yeah.
Mr. Butler, and I know you had a comment.
Yeah, just the other thing is open space. So if you wouldn't mind going back to the site plan, Jared, thank you. So there's really no open space on here outside of what really is just circulation area for pedestrians between buildings. And that's a big concern. You know, there's quite a substantial amount of open space requirement for our standard, you know, R4 and for many of our other zoning districts. So actually their first site plan was better from that perspective. They had a nice substantial chunk of open space, or amenity space might be a better word. And, you know, staff feels and our policies reflect this, and our comprehensive plan and our codes certainly reflect this, our current codes, that's an important thing for people to have private open space, even if you're right next to a park. But private open space is important. So the FAR, or not the FAR, the density, you know, the urban medium, so that's the reason why staff set the number of units the way we did at 36, because that works out to 40 units per acre in the comprehensive plan, and that's the top range for urban medium, top end of the range. And, you know, there's a lot of testing that goes into working out those numbers, and, you know, as we see here, it's really hard to do something that fits in and stay under that 40. And so that's why it was set the way it was, because, you know, when we go back years ago when we were doing this testing, well, you can't fit everything you need with including open space and parking, and still have the heights that you need, the lower heights to fit into the surrounding neighborhoods, and have these really high densities. It's just really hard to do. So you've got to give up something, and in this case, what's being given up is open space. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well. The stories, I think, you know, if we've got 2 stories next to the residential, I mean that, or the single family, then that's addressing that. But it is the open space that's an issue.
I guess I can address that in 2 ways. I'll say, one, that the comprehensive plan notes that 3 stories next to 1 story is compatible and appropriate. I feel like we've taken that a step further to say that the 2-story next to the 1 story, and then we're stepping up to it. I think from the open space, in reading the staff report and what the TE is, staff did not recommend additional open space. They recommended capping the units. So even if we capped the units, the site plan would remain the same with larger units. I think when we think about downtown, we think about the access to public parks, public spaces, and commercial districts. As a downtown resident, and I think if you look at most of the downtown apartment complexes, the vast majority of amenity spaces go unused and are what sell an apartment, but they're not used daily. My wife and I, we view downtown, like many, as our backyard. So we're okay with living in a 700 square foot apartment when we have access to incredible public parks and public spaces throughout the core. So I think there's a lot of fourplexes, a lot of eightplexes that sit almost entirely on the lot with a parking lot that work just fine. And so I think we've provided open space in small pockets that will allow for outdoor grills, kind of outdoor gathering spaces that would be sufficient here, but we are just a block or two away from McKinley Park, which is a very large public park. Then, of course, the Plaza District is a great spot to hang out, and we're 2 blocks south of that.
I think, and I appreciate the comments about the open space and the importance of private open space, and know that that's an important consideration that we should continue to make. I think for me, as somebody who spends a lot of time in the Plaza District, is well connected to the Plaza District, and listening to the conversations that were had in our meetings with the developer and other commissioners about this, I think we should be concerned about the ability for there to be housing that is even remotely affordable for the people who work in the Plaza District to be able to live in Classen Tenpen. And so higher densities are going to make that much more affordable, much more possible than they otherwise would be. This is a growing area. The single family housing is, I mean, what are there, darn near $1 million homes on 16th Street, which would have been unimaginable a decade ago. So I only think that, that Classen Tenpen will soon be headed in a very similar direction. And so we've got to find ways to ensure that, there is some degree of density and affordability that's here. I'm okay, I feel comfortable with this only because of my familiarity with the area and confidence that those other public spaces are available, but I'd be curious to hear how the rest of the commission feels about it.
I have to say, I am very, very clued in to what Mr. Butler is saying about this. And I would challenge you to design outdoor space that is usable even in this kind of a context. I understand that you've got these patio areas, and that may really be it. I don't know. But you're right. This area is calling out for relatively affordable housing.
Relative being the key word.
Yeah, and just with housing, with construction costs being what they are, I think even when you set out to do that, you're really climbing uphill right now. I don't know. This is more difficult than I thought it would be for me, frankly.
Well, I think with regard to open space, it's about creating meaningful places, not just providing space. Because particularly in Oklahoma, is like a big open area is actually not going to get used because it's not pleasant to be in. So, I can understand and relate more to the pocket spaces, and when I'm seeing this site plan and I'm seeing buildings separated but with common areas where people cross paths, and there's some zones that can be landscaped and developed where you're protected from the wind, you're in the shade, those spaces tend to get used. And that's how we design projects as well. So I can relate to that, and I think that there's still allowance for meaningful open space on this site, considering the need for the density as well. So I understand it's a relaxation of what might be required elsewhere, but I think it's appropriate in this context for the same reasons you noted, that with the nearby parks and Plaza District. I also live about 4 blocks from here too, so I'm familiar with the area as well.
And I appreciate that. I'll follow up on Chairman Pennington's comment. When we met with the Plaza District folks and the Tenpen folks, their biggest concern in the neighborhood right now is affordability. There are restaurant operators that are struggling to find staff. When your area is no longer affordable, people are having to drive further and longer distances, which adds to the cost. And so in that time that they're commuting, they might be choosing a different place to work that's closer to home. So we talked through what this project looks like if there's not that type of density. And I think the real fear that we heard from residents was this being developed as 4 to 6 single-family homes, because you're absolutely correct in that there are homes selling on 16th Street for 1.2, 1.3, up to $1.6 million, which is vastly different than where the neighborhood has traditionally been. So allowing density like this helps keep those rental rates down and hopefully helps preserve other housing stock from being completely flipped, renovated, and increased up to $1.2 million, right?
Oh, go ahead.
Is there no protesters?
We have no protests on this project.
Is there anyone in the audience wishing to be heard on this item? Appears not. I think we're just still stuck on setbacks. I don't want to lose track of that issue too. Are we happy with the 0 to 5? You said, what was the language again? 3 to 5 feet, right?
It is correct. It's 3 to 5 feet. It's just the building on the corner that we're allowing to go to the property line.
Yeah.
But Jared, if you go back to the aerial, I'll point out, so the one house that's on our property will be removed. There are 3 homes immediately to our south. And you can see if you extended that black line down, the house, the furthest south, sits almost on the property line. The ones up above start to shift slightly back at most 5 feet. And you can just compare that with the sidewalk width. If you put that at their front porch, they're at most 5 feet off that property line. So we are not asking for a widely different setback than what those homes have.
Staff thoughts on that, on the setback?
Unless you guys correct me if I'm misunderstanding something, please, Sarah or JJ, but I think that's appropriate. I mean, there seems to be a wide right-of-way here. I don't see Blackwelder ever, changing. But, the goal is to have setbacks that are consistent. That's kind of a key design principle. So drawing that down, it looks to be, 3 to 5 feet or so. And, I agree with what was said about the setbacks, that's pretty typical. If you get within, 5 feet of what's kind of along there, then, that's, if you get beyond that, then it starts to look strange to people, but that's generally what, a good rule of thumb.
That satisfies me, at least. Okay, let's talk about density. Let's go back. I'm in support of the compromise position of 53 units. I'm in support of that. I do understand the issue about the open space, but again, I think the public policy, the public issue of access to housing, for me, outweighs the need for us to demand more of that common space. But that's my opinion. Would love to hear if there's other thoughts.
I'd just like to know what would be the difference between 59 and 53? I mean, buildings change, any changes other than 6 more parking spots?
I think in our conversation with Commissioner Govine, I think, there will be a dumpster location that'll take away a parking spot or 2. So I think as the final site plan works out, I think our expectation was that 59 likely came down a couple anyway, just to meet parking requirements. So we're comfortable with the 53. I don't know that the buildings will change. I think some of the units may just get a little bigger, slightly.
Well, Commissioner Govine, you want to take the first shot at a motion and see where we are?
Sure, if no one else has comments. I think the one thing I'm still struggling with a little bit is the language on TE number 1. So I wanted to, let me test this out and before I move, is we are saying the setback along North Blackwelder Avenue shall be 3 feet?
Well, he can read the language that's exactly in the MDS.
Okay, so we're just approving that same language.
And so, Mark, do you want to read it one more time? So
I could read it. It is in the SPUD, though.
Okay.
So let me get to it. So what we're asking for, I think, would be to strike TE1 because this language is already in the master design statement, which is 3 feet, which is generally in line with the existing structures, except that the building on the hard corner of Northwest 14th and Blackwelder shall be permitted to be located on the property line as shown in the attached site plan.
Okay. Well, Mr. Chairman, I would move to recommend approval of SPUD 1454 with the language as read on setbacks and a maximum number of dwelling units of 53.
So for clarity, again, it would be to strike TE1 because that language is already in the MDS, and then to amend TE2 to that the maximum shall be 53 units instead of 36.
That is correct.
Excellent. Motion is to recommend approval of SPUD 1454 to City Council with the striking TE1, amending TE2 from 36 maximum units to 53 maximum units. It's been seconded by Commissioner Noble. Please cast your votes when available. And the motion passes. Thank you. We're in line for item 15. Oh, 15's been withdrawn. We're in line for item 16.
Item 16 is case PUD 1915, application to rezone 13 Northwest 13th Street from I-2, C4, and R4 to PUD 1915.
Once again, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. Here on behalf of the applicant, also Mark Zitzel is here with me. I want to thank everybody for the opportunity this week to visit with them about this project. It's a very exciting project here in the core. It's the tract of land that is known as the DeLisi tract. It's a strange piece right now because you've got a big chunk of it zoned straight I-2, and then C4 and R4, and then the corner actually sits in the DTD1. So you'll notice the boundaries of the PUD, we actually don't include the DTD1 piece. Any approval for any buildings there will have to go through the DDRC for approval. So what we have tried to do in this PUD is to bring into it urban-style design principles like you might see in downtown. We believe that we have accomplished that in terms of uses. We have uses ranging from hotels and multifamily, office, retail, restaurants. It's all of the things you would expect to see here. Our hope is that it provides an opportunity for the city and the other property owners along Broadway to find some alternative development ideas and kind of spur development along this tract. Broadway right now is frankly nothing more than an industrialized speedway to get someone to 235. We think that projects like this will have a major impact in changing that. So the PUD before you, we think to be compatible with what one might expect to see in the core. We think it is in keeping with momentum that you've seen recently on projects in the core. There are 4 TEs. We agree with TEs 2, 3, and 4. TE1 we don't agree to, but in talking with Commissioner Govine, we have some alternative language that we would propose, and that is that no more than 50% of the street frontage within this PUD along Broadway shall be less than 30 feet. Commissioner Govine raised a good concern, that being this being a series of pad sites for low-scale restaurants. Of course, that's not what we're aiming for, so we think by prohibiting more than 50% of the street frontage along Broadway, we think we're going to accomplish that goal. Perhaps everything will be more than 30 feet, but we don't want to foreclose the opportunity for a wonderful end user that perhaps would be something everybody would want merely because they don't want a 30-foot tall building, or worst case, they don't want to build a 30-foot tall building that is kind of faux on the top, right? So we think that language accomplishes the goal and the concern raised by Commissioner Govine. So we'd propose to modify TE1 to that language I read.
And one more time.
Sure. No more than 50% of the street frontage within this PUD along Broadway shall be less than 30 feet.
Okay.
I have an alternate wording for that.
Well, let's hear it.
Let's hear it.
From our discussion, I was going to propose the minimum that the TE1, the sentence remains as is, the minimum building height for buildings located along Broadway Ave shall be 2 stories and 30 feet for no less than 50% of the frontage. So that's agreeing to, you get half the block, you can do single story and less than 30 feet.
I think we say the same thing. Maybe it's just the difference in an architect and a lawyer. I don't
Well,
know.
I'm keeping the 2 stories in. You just said 30 feet.
Yeah,
I'm
no.
saying 30 feet and 2 stories.
Oh, okay.
That's the only difference. I
So
think
we could
hopefully
say
we are
less
saying the same
than
thing.
30 feet and 2 stories.
Okay, same thing
Okay.
then. Good.
Anything else on this, Commissioner Govine?
I had no other concerns with this. I think it looks like a really exciting development, and I look forward to seeing it happen.
So do you want, let me try to read this
Right.
again just so we're on the same page. And I'm happy to change it, Commissioner Govine. No more than 50% of the street frontage within this PUD along Broadway shall be less than 30 feet and 2 stories. So only half of it could be less than 30 feet and 2 stories.
I think that's right.
Right, okay.
Is that right?
And
That's why I liked keeping the sentence as is just saying for no less than 50% of the frontage.
I like that too.
I,
Actually, the reference to the, in the PUD along Broadway, somehow that sounds backwards. I like the way Commissioner Govine has suggested it.
well, of course, it has to be within the PUD. We're not modifying tracks outside of the
Don't
PUD.
argue with an English teacher.
You trailed off. I couldn't hear the last piece.
there's at least consensus for the commission, so, I mean, on this, I think so, on that issue, I think we're in agreement.
And we will have specific plans, right? So the PUD requires specific plans. So you're going to see this
Look at it again.
probably many times. before it's all said and done.
Hopefully not as many times as oak. Or no, are we calling it the oak or
No,
oak?
it's just oak.
Oak, excuse me. Hopefully not as many times as oak.
Lowercase THE, uppercase OAK.
Gotcha. Any questions from commissioners? Anyone in the audience wishing to be heard on PUD 1915? Commissioner Govine?
Okay, in that case, I move to recommend approval of PUD 1915 with a slightly modified TE number 1. And listen to this one more time just to make sure you agree. The minimum building height for buildings located along Broadway Ave shall be 2 stories and 30 feet for no less than 50% of the frontage.
Sure.
And that only applies to the frontage of this
Of Broadway.
PUD.
Of course, yeah.
And the other, and TE number 2, 3, and 4 as.
We agree to those.
Agreed as noted.
And the motion is to recommend approval of PUD 1915 to City Council with the amended technical evaluations as read into the record. It's been seconded by Commissioner LaForge. Please cast your votes when available. And the motion passes. Thank you. We're in line for item 17.
Item 17 is case PUD 1917, application to rezone 5500 Northwest 164th Street from AA and R1.
Once again, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. This is an application for a PUD that would allow a single-family residential development, but with modified lot sizes. At the time of filing, our lot size we requested was 2,500 square feet. Through the course of this process, I became engaged with one of the neighbors who is also here, who happens to be the HOA president. We talked through concerns raised by the neighborhood to the east, and ultimately what I propose today is to add some TEs. There are no TEs now, but I'd like to add some TEs to modify the development in a manner that I think will allow the neighbors to no longer be objecting to this. So we would like to modify the minimum lot size to meet the R1ZL standard, so that being 4,000 square feet. We would like to prohibit dumpsters. We would like to add a provision that the maximum lot coverage is 50%, which of course is what standard R1 is. Prohibit EFS, require a tree in every backyard. There was a question about the building frontage and the front setback. So we have 15 feet. We can add a provision, I think the code already accounts for it, but we can add a provision that if it is a 15-foot front building line, the garage is required to be set back 20 feet so that cars, of course, are not blocking sidewalks in the public thoroughfare. Ideal Home standard product that you've seen over and over again now is that 15-foot with the garage set back. It actually allows for kind of a more interesting design element anyways, rather than having that garage all the way up front. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Again, that's going to add, I'm going to say 5 TEs. So again, 1, the 15-foot front yard setback would require a 20-foot setback for the front garage line. Prohibit dumpsters, prohibit EFS, require a tree in every backyard, and put a minimum lot coverage of 50%. And also, I'm sorry, one more, being change the side yard setbacks to 5 and 5 rather than 0 and 10.
Okay.
What's that?
And no dumpsters.
Yeah.
Any questions from, this is Ward 8. Any questions from commissioners on this? We do have people in the audience wishing to speak, so. All right, then we're going to go ahead and hear from them. First, we'll begin with Brian Richards. Please give us your name and address for the record, and you have 5 minutes to address the commission.
First time doing this. I'm Brian Richards. I live at 5601 Northwest 163rd Terrace. I own a lot or a home that backs up to the west side of this proposed development. When I got this in the mail, I thought it was just going to be, regular houses like everything around it. But then I come to find out that they're wanting to put 140 lots in there into an area that's nothing like, and basically put it all the way up on the fence line as well. It's nothing like any of the houses around it. I do understand there's some changes. I'm not sure what the new map would look like. So I don't know how to really, at this point. But I would like to object to the plan that's shown up here because it's just way too dense. It's going to be right up on my fence line. It's going to, I feel it's going to lower my property value, and it's also going to take away from the privacy that my family and I have in our backyard, as well as our neighbors. I think that's about all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. And just to be clear, this is no longer an accurate rendering because of the changes that the applicant did read into the record that they've agreed to. As far as the setback from, I guess, those properties to the west, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, and of course, we'll have to plat it. So to your point,
Yeah.
the plat's going to look nothing like this based upon our change. So we have a 10-foot rear yard setback. So I don't know how they're going to be oriented now that we have to totally
Lot sizes are
redesign
gonna
it.
be
'Cause
bigger?
these are
Yeah.
designed at 2,500 square feet. It's going to be a minimum of 4,000 now, and of course, different streets are going to require larger lots. So I don't know how it's going to end up in terms of backing up to him, but we have a 10-foot rear yard setback.
So minimum 10, and then obviously this rendering isn't accurate anymore because it's based on 2,500 square foot lots versus what will now have to be at a minimum of 4,000. Does that help at all?
It does, but will there be another, will we have the chance to see the design and have another meeting on this, or?
Well, I don't know about another meeting, but at least as far as a meeting between the applicant and neighbors. But I can say that if this zoning is approved with the language that we've just discussed, then the applicant will have to come back and present a plat, and that will show how the houses are actually oriented on this parcel.
And you will get notice. So the plat is a public hearing. Notice will be sent, just like you got notice of this. So the design, and again, Sarah just made a point, we can revise this as we go to city council and have a revised site plan before then.
Okay, good, thank you. And the other thing to point out is if they're wanting to zone it R1 ZL, that's not consistent with anything around it, so that should be kind of straightforward. But thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do not have anyone else signed up to speak. Is there anyone else wishing to be heard on this item, PUD 1917? Please.
Could I just say, I'm almost certain that Mr. Box intended to say that when it comes to this property being platted, he'd be more than happy to meet with the neighbors and show them that.
I thought I heard something similar, Commissioner Powers, that he'd be willing to have that conversation with the
I mean, I've
neighbors.
been actively engaged with perhaps he's in a different neighborhood, so I'm happy to give him my contact. I think it's on the front of the document. In fact, it is. But yeah, we're happy to do that if I'm involved in the plat. I mean, I don't, but we can also talk between now and city council.
So it might be good for you to have Mr. Richards' contact information so that you can make sure that you're connected to him as those conversations continue. Please, go ahead. I apologize. Please give us your name and address for the record, and you have 5 minutes to address the
My name
commission.
is Nina Mooney. I live at 16105 Still Meadows Drive. I am in the Still Meadows Housing Addition, which is to the west of this proposed change. I'm not really sure about the changes of the rezoning and what those mean, what it is now versus what the
Original
the
looked like?
petition is. I do have some questions, and I think that what I'd like to do is have you be aware of what our questions are. The changes that were just suggested don't give me an opportunity to evaluate what that would look like and how that would then impact our lives. And so to change that zoning right now doesn't seem to me respectful of the current property owners that are adjacent to these properties. Originally, the setback to the west side was going to be 10 feet from the property line to the building line. Sirs, that's not even the length of this desk here. That's of concern to me because we are in lots that are nice, we're in lovely homes. I don't understand how, if there's going to be more than 2 or 3 stories. We're talking about people looking directly into your neighbors' yards.
I would agree with the previous gentleman that this petition is not at all in keeping with the neighborhoods that are in the adjoining areas. I also have a very big concern about parking. I'm glad to hear that dumpsters were addressed. With this number of units, where are all these cars going to be parked? And when we look at that, we live in two-vehicle families. I don't know how that would even work in this area. The north side of this petition is 164th Street, which is a two-lane road. The traffic going onto that two-lane road is going to be a little bit of concern. There is a hill that goes, that's to the west of this, that access to 164th Street would be a big concern. So parking is a concern, the setback is concerned, 164th Street access is of concern. I would like to see any rezoning of this area tabled until the surrounding neighbors would be able to identify how is that going to impact our lives. Thank you.
Thank you. And just for a few things for clarification about the process at this point, I think it's important, and this was always an important reminder for commissioners as well. When we're dealing with the rezoning and not the plat, we have to remember that the visual is just an aid for us. The language in the MDS, the language in the staff report, the black and white words are what are going to dictate what the visual ultimately becomes. So it's very important for us to not be hung up on exactly what this looks like, because that visual is not what the applicant is being held to. What's written in this language is what the developer is being held to. So that's a very important thing to remember. The other thing that's important to remember is regardless of whether this commission makes the decision to recommend approval of this as is, or whether we recommend to deny this item as is, it is going to the city council in 6 weeks for them to make the ultimate call. So as far as the opportunity for there to be conversations between the neighborhood and the applicant, there are 6 weeks between now and city council. And again, we are not the final decision maker as far as this item. I think it's also important to remember that the applicant will have to plat this. So again, as was mentioned, they'll have to come back and actually show us a visual that we can hold them to that would show you exactly where the streets are, exactly where the houses will be oriented, all of that. So there's going to be several times that you're going to get notice about these items. So the preliminary plat, the final plat, you're going to have opportunities to weigh in, and again, even weigh in at the city council when it goes there as well. So I think those are great opportunities. I think I'm not sure about where the neighborhood association lines are, but I hope that, I know that we've at least been in contact with, I've been included in emails from the neighborhood association president, I believe. So I hope that if you have not been in contact with them, or if the neighbors are different, if the neighborhoods are different, that we've got to make sure that everyone's on the same page with that. And so I'd ask that the applicant ensure that we are all in alignment, hearing the same things. And
So I will get her number as well. I've got Mr. Richards. I've got the neighbor to the east. So to the question about the 10-foot, the 10-foot rear yard setback that we propose, of course, is the same as R1.
Yeah.
So we're not seeking to make it any different than R1. In terms of traffic, you'll notice planning commissions that came before you, there is a stub to the east and a stub to the south. So we have interconnectivity kind of throughout. The only one we don't have is to the west.
Height?
What? We don't modify the height, so we have the same height requirements as R1.
yeah,
And what is that for?
35 feet, 2 stories.
So that's important also, as you noted. This is that height requirement would be the same, just like your property. It would be the same for these homes as well.
And that's a limit and that's a limit max, right? That's not necessarily saying you are doing 2 stories, that's just what?
No, that's the maximum.
Maximum.
Of course, single story is permitted. That's just a maximum height allowed under the code.
Any comments for anyone else wishing to be heard on this? Please go ahead. Either one of you, whichever one wants to go first. You have
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Kayla Curry, 16204 Monarch Ridge Boulevard. We're the ones that submitted the letter.
Gotcha.
And I'm the one that's been on the email communication.
You received so many compliments, commissioners, about your letter.
Yes, thank you.
I was
It was
among them, so.
It was a joint effort. I'm a lawyer, I'm an architect, and so dream team probably when it comes to something like this. Everything Mr. Bach said is exactly what we agreed to. The only thing that we'd preface be clarified, which I think may be within the minimum zoning base district, is the 40-foot minimum lot width, which I think falls within that 4,000 square feet if they are 100 by 40, and the 50-foot minimum corner width. Otherwise, everything else that Mr. Bach said is exactly what we have discussed and agreed to. I will clarify that my neighborhood is to the east. I think the other people here are to the west.
To the
So
west. Okay.
this is what me and my neighbors have discussed and what we feel is appropriate.
Okay.
Mr. Box, is that right? Are those covered in the R1 LZ?
We can modify it just to be safe to make the minimum lot width 40 foot. Yes, that is the standard lot width under R1ZL.
Thank you.
The only reason it was less was because we had a 2,500 square foot lot size.
Anyone else wishing to be heard? Sure. Well, I think he was first, actually, if you don't mind, since he raised his hand before. But you can go next, I promise. Please give us your name and address for the record. You have 5 minutes to address the commission.
Thank you. My name's Ronnie Jones. I live in the Still Meadows Addition, which covers it's to the west and also to the south side. This area, it says that this is consistent with this asking to rezone it. It would be consistent with what's in the area. And what you don't see is everything north of the 164th is all agricultural. This is all farm community. This resembles nothing in the area, what you're showing here. And you even said, this picture means nothing, it's what's in the words. So, and based on that, I am 100% against any rezoning from R1 to whatever the zoning is that they're asking for to permit this, because whatever this is not consistent with anything in the area. This whole area, Deer Creek, and when I moved out there 20 years ago, was to live in a rural kind of community, and I realized there's going to be development and things are going to, projects are going to be done, but this was zoned R1 for a reason, and therefore, I'm asking you, and I'll ask the city council as well, to reject any rezoning. I don't even want to, it doesn't matter what the new picture looks like and if it's cut down from 140 to 120. It's not consistent. That's, not anything other than R1 is not consistent with what's in the area. In fact, if anything, it's more rural. It's more agricultural. It's just big lot, acreages and stuff. And so this would not match anything with, within 3 or 4 miles of it. So I'm asking that you reject the rezoning. I don't care about the dumpsters or the setbacks or anything else. I'm saying reject the zoning change. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're ready.
So I live on the east side of it as well, on 164, and yes, we did have some.
And I'm sorry, could you give us your name and address for the record also?
Dennis. Yeah, I live on 16409 Monarchfield Road, so it's on the east side of this development. I agree with most of everything that's going, that we discussed or lawyer discussed with the developer lawyer. The only thing is my concern is the street that is connecting with the street that is connecting with our street, because I live right on that edge there. I was hoping and wanted to discuss to see if there's a possibility of making that street with a gate that is for use of emergency only. And the reason for that is there's a playground right east of where that street is, and my kids, and there's a lot of kids that plays in that area and have fun activity, and having that open to 100+ houses going to be, it's going to cause issues and concern. I know that street has to connect, but is there a possibility of making that as well an entry for emergency only? So there will be like a gate required there. However that's going to take place, or who have to fund that, then we'll determine that. But that's my comment as well. I mean, yes, the setback on the property itself, we are a little larger, so we do have 15 plus 20 acre setback. So back of the house, and making that tight, all the way tight to each of our property, I think is a little concerning as well. It's my comment on that. But I'm leaning heavily to making an emergency exit or entry only to that street entering that area. Is what I would request.
Thank you. I will, in response to the question about whether or not we could create a crash gate versus having an open street, yes, that is possible for this commission to make that decision. However, that is against our comprehensive plan. Our comprehensive plan asks that we promote connectivity among neighborhoods. And so it is frequently an issue before this commission to decide whether or not, when there are street stubs, like there is in this instance with your neighborhood, it's frequently a question of, do we have to have the connectivity? Should we not? The answer is our job as this commission is supposed to be to enforce and interpret the comprehensive plan. It'd be consistent with the plan for us to allow that to be a street just like any other street connecting any other neighborhood just like yours. So that would be a question for this commission to decide. I, for one, I understand and appreciate that there may be a playground nearby, but I think that's the importance of making sure if there are other ways to traffic calming devices should be what we should focus on, rather than eliminating the connectivity that our comprehensive plan encourages us to have. So that's my position, but I'm open to, whatever the commission ultimately makes that decision of whether that's appropriate. Any thoughts about that?
It's not really a thoroughfare. It's 2 blocks long.
We got to have connectivity. I mean, it's a thing. We got to have it.
So again, this would be although it looks like there's consensus, we'll see when the final vote happens, but I would encourage you, if that's your view, to take that to your city council person as well, to make sure that they've heard that.
I would also say, with respect to that issue of the plan, that the gentleman's concerns, I did write his name down and now I've lost it, Mr. Jones, the concerns about this not looking like anything else. Of course, what's across 164th Street is unincorporated. We don't have any control over that. This property is currently zoned agricultural, so clearly it's going to change and be something different than it is now. But the plan definitely encourages a mixture of housing types, and I think the fact that it doesn't look like everything else around it is not necessarily, and maybe you would say definitely not, a downside. It is intended to be something different than what's around it.
It's true.
I would agree, going from 2,500 up to 4,000 is already pretty close to the 6,000.
Minimum.
I'm looking at I think maybe the aerial view is probably a better page to have up on the screen at this point, but you look to the right, and I mean, those are closely spaced homes, fairly densely packed. To the left, to the west is a little slightly different, but again, we're splitting hairs on that one, I think.
Is there anyone else in the audience wishing to be heard on this item, PUD 1917? Then why don't we hear at least the recommended TEs one more time before we decide?
Well, I think there's 7.
I think I've got them covered. I want to say some other things first and then make a motion. I think unless they changed, I've got them down. I've got them down, if that's right, I think. I'm not usually on top of it, but I'm on this one. Okay. Thanks. So I'm going to be making a motion to approve and recommend it to council, but I want to say a few things first, which is really appreciate all the different comments and kind of addressing all the different ones if I can, because you guys are all very thoughtful, and nobody was overkill on the whole, why you don't want this. I objected, a lot of folks objected, I think, in advance to the 2,500 lots. We try to do compatibility. That doesn't mean you can't have things different next to you, and that doesn't mean you can't have small houses next to big houses, but they need to be at least somewhat gradual. And so by the applicant agreeing to larger lot sizes, which will result in less houses, it alleviates some of these things. All these other things I'll get to on the Ts they agreed to were very much thoughtful to the concerns that we had heard and that several of you and several of us had raised. The comments about, we've kind of covered a lot of this in little pieces, but it was zoned ag. And so there's a little lack of certainty you have when you're in neighborhoods where there's ag. It's ag across the street, it's ag right there. Who knows what's going to be there? So the fact that we're doing houses next to houses, a lot of you recognize that's an area, that's a type of compatibility. The crash gate, the chair already covered, I think, my thoughts, and I think a lot of our thoughts is that the connectivity and allowing the rest of this neighborhood to enjoy the park is part of, I think, why we'll be against the crash gate, or I won't be requesting it. Do appreciate if a new map or a new picture, which is a visual only. Sorry, a lot of people already covered some of what I was going to say, but it is just a visual, but it's nice sometimes to have a sense of what it might be. So if that could be done before the city council meeting, although it's not hard and fast, it can be helpful if that's ready before the city council meeting for the neighbors. Let's see. That really covers it. I think we got all the things that I and some of the other commissioners would want to see. Even though we don't see the visual now, we have some experience of knowing what the difference is of a 2,500 to a 4,000 square foot lot and the setbacks that they're accommodating. It was too aggressive, I think, and it was not compatible. It was too close, a little too small of those things, and I think this is a good balance. So with that, I'll unless somebody else has anything, I'm gonna give it a shot, and if I miss it, somebody can ask questions or can add in. But I'll make the motion to approve this application, recommend for approval to City Council. He's changed to the R1LZ. That's not a TE, I don't think. That's just that's part of your application, right?
So
I'm sorry, go for it. Yeah. Now correct me.
I don't want to steal your thunder.
No, that's fine.
Okay. It's just the lot size. It's already R1ZL as a base.
Okay.
So we're just modifying minimum lot size.
Okay. So that is a TE then, or is that you're just changing up? Okay. So the first TE then is minimum lot size of 4,000 square feet. I'm going to go ahead in different order. The second one is minimum lot width of 40 feet. Number 3 would be prohibit dumpsters. Number 4 is a maximum lot coverage of 50%. Number 5, prohibit, sorry, I missed this one, EFIS? What?
EFIS.
EFIS? I'll go with that, I don't know what it is. Tree in each yard, was it the backyard?
Backyard.
Backyard. Garage must be 20-foot setback. Can that just be period, or is it if there's a 15-foot setback? Why not just garage must be 20-foot setback? Okay. Garage must be 20-foot setback. Setbacks of 5 and 5 foot, not 0 and 10.
Side yards.
I'm sorry?
Side yards.
Side yards. You already covered on the 10-foot rear because that was already required. So I think that's it.
Good.
Is that covered?
Yes.
I think we've got them all. The motion before the commission is to recommend approval of PUD 1917 to City Council with the added technical evaluations as read into the record. It's been moved by Commissioner LaForge, seconded by Commissioner Govine. Please cast your votes when available. And he is absent.
He recused.
He's recused.
You want to show him recused?
What's that?
I don't know if he cares. It shows that he was absent. I
Yeah.
think you want to specifically recuse.
Yeah, I think he wants to be
So,
recused.
I guess abstain would be
Maybe it's the
more
same thing, or
appropriate.
abstain, yes, he
Yeah.
abstained. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're now in line for item 18.
This is SPUD 1452, application to rezone 719 Northwest 23rd Street from PUD 1218.
Good afternoon. David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. The architect also here with me this afternoon. Another project in the urban core that you guys don't often see, and today you had 3 of them. This one, like the one in Midtown, went to one of the design review committees yesterday, that being the Urban Design Committee, and they recommended approval. So this is a stretch that's kind of interesting. It's been a series of restaurants over the years, and our intent through this PUD is to keep it, keep those buildings, and kind of change the concept to make those buildings a restaurant bar with what is now the parking lot to be kind of an interior courtyard with food trucks. So that food truck concept is something that has been popping up all through the core. It's another opportunity to get people together in a setting in the core like this that we think is a positive thing. So the SPUD would allow all the uses necessary. And talking with Commissioner Powers, as well as at the Urban Design Committee hearing yesterday, there was a question about hours of operation for the outdoor music. So what we propose is that on the evenings of Sunday through Thursday, 10 p.m. would be the cutoff for outdoor music, and Friday and Saturday it would be midnight. Ms. Powers also asked about generators. We are happy to prohibit those within the SPUD. My client will be providing pads with electrical outlets for all of the food trucks, so we can prohibit generators. And then finally, we need to add a TE, as staff reminded me, to not require the 100-foot setback. How's it worded, JJ?
I think with your hours of operation, it shouldn't matter, but
Okay.
You can add a section that the 100-foot setback for outdoor seating would not apply.
Okay.
Fox?
Yes, ma'am.
I noticed in the Urban Design Committee's staff report, the dumpster separation was 50 feet. I think our staff report says 40 feet. We're going 50, I assume, since that's what was approved.
Yeah, so we agreed with all the conditions in the UDC staff report, and it's actually been revised accordingly already, so yes.
Okay. Okay.
Anything further?
This is kind of a unique little area, of course. People are probably pretty familiar with it. I think it has not realized its full potential. I hope that this will help it do so. I had a laundry list of questions about, no rooftop patios. We're going to include that.
No
one,
rooftop
aren't we?
patios.
And other things. But I've had all those questions answered, and so I'm definitely in favor of this. I would like to know whether there's anybody else here. I was so astonished that there was not any protest, frankly. But there's better buffering along that north property line than I thought there was. The buildings that actually set back against it, of course, create some buffering. The agreement not to allow for generators is really going to help manage the noise and so on. So is there anybody left who wants to be heard on this?
Well, and also Commissioner Powers, just making sure that we are all on the same page on the hours of operation
Yes.
as we discussed in the meeting we had with the applicant.
We'll do those in TEs.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anybody?
I guess you could have got churches to sell to you, huh?
Yeah.
That'd have been
Hopefully the days of
nice
churches
for a
chicken
bit.
along Northwest 23rd Street are soon to be done.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, this is going to help this. It is a weird area, and it's kind of a cool area, but it's not real friendly as far as walking around and parking type. So.
Oh,
I think this
parking,
will
that was
help.
another thing. That I had some real concern. I mean, the parking between these buildings just really is not very helpful.
It's not good.
But they do intend to improve the parking lot across Chartel to the west, the old Miroir, and so they will use that for parking.
Oh, that's good. Okay.
Well, I was just wondering why they would give up what little parking they have, but they've made separate arrangements for that, so.
It's worth noting, so the
That's good.
developers are the same folks that developed the collective, right? So it's kind of a collective type concept. There, of course, there's no parking. They offer valet. So they are familiar with how to run a use like this when parking is limited. They, of course, have way more parking here than they have zero at the collective. So they're fully capable of kind of handling that logistical issue.
And I will say that it seems to me, I haven't held any town halls on this topic, but the shared parking along 23rd Street works pretty well, and there's a lot of it nearby. So it's not on site, it's not baked in, but you know, it's nearby, so.
Yeah, I think that's generally pretty true, at least at that part of 23rd Street. The whole thing needs, you know, just to be slowed down. Try going to the east side of, you know, it's just terrible, so.
Yeah, I understand. You're taking your life in your hands across
Definitely.
23rd Street.
Any other questions from commissioners? Anyone here wishing to be heard on SPUD 1452? Seeing none, Commissioner Powers.
I'm going to move approval of item number 18, SPUD 1452, with the following additional TEs. Do we have to talk about the awnings or whatever?
Canopies? I don't think so.
The canopies, or have we just?
No, I think we've addressed that through UDC.
Okay. So following additional TEs, that the hours of operation, this is not quite right, outdoor operation.
The outdoor music.
Outdoor music will be limited Sunday through Thursday to 10 p.m., Friday and Saturday to midnight. We don't have to talk about the 100-foot rule, we've decided.
Can we, just out of abundance of caution?
Whatever the 100-foot rule is, I think with respect to outdoor seating separation from residential, is that
Right, yes.
will not apply within this SPUD. Generators will be prohibited. There'll be no rooftop patios. I think that's it.
That's what I have, yes.
And I did actually get from the applicant that there's only going to be one additional sign.
Correct.
So we'll include that.
A crusade against signs.
It has enough signs. There are signs. That's my point.
Any other questions about the TEs from commissioners? The motion before the commission is to recommend approval of SPUD 1452 to City Council. It's been seconded by Commissioner Privet. Please cast your votes. Of course, this recommendation includes the technical evaluations as read into the record by Commissioner Powers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 19 has been continued. We're ready for item 20, which is to approve the Planning Commission's schedule of regular meetings. There was a discussion in our meeting with staff before this, before the commission meeting. I know we have a number of new commissioners. Previously, the commission went to one meeting a month for June and July, as well as November and December. The high volume of cases in June and July was, to be frank, it was so bad. We were here till, we were regularly in the summertime here until 6, 7 o'clock because it was just so many cases. So we moved to multiple meetings in June and July. An issue that was presented to me was that, it makes it, when we don't take any breaks, it makes it harder for our staff to be able to have a vacation. And so we discussed maybe some ways that we could balance the need for our staff to take a break and not being overwhelmed with Planning Commission cases. Where I think that we landed, at least for me to recommend to all of us, is that we nix the June 8th meeting, but keep the schedule otherwise as written. So I'd love to hear thoughts, and I'd love to hear from staff also if there are any additional thoughts on that whole issue of whether or not to keep the summer schedule as is or change it.
I'll say that when we did that, I really thought it would not work. And the reason being, when I was, still had children at home, it was a huge issue to try to schedule vacations and that kind of thing. Their school schedule dominates everything, and you've just got limited time. Well, then the school district changed their calendar, and so that messed up everything anyway. But I really thought it would be very difficult for us to have a quorum in those summer meetings. And it is a little more difficult,
It
as
is.
we've all experienced, but it hasn't proven prohibitive, I don't think. I think we can handle that. I do agree, though, that there needs to be some predictable time for staff to have some downtime, for them to schedule their off time and so on. And as you're about to find out, you know, dealing with kids in the summertime, it dominates your life, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, you've got to plan around them. I don't know how many other people that affects on the horseshoe, but, you know, it's a thing, so.
Yeah, it's a real thing. So want to be sensitive to that. And also,
And it really is true. I mean, he's not kidding. It was a predictable thing that in the one meeting that we had for the months of whether we did June and July or whether we did July and August, whichever one it was, it made the meeting we did have incredible. I mean, it was just burdensome. It really was.
so I think this is at least better. And maybe if we can find more, you know, ways around how to better handle this for staff, I'm certainly open to it. So, other thoughts on this? Then I think the motion would be to approve this calendar, but removing the June 8th meeting from the calendar as printed.
If nobody else wants to, I'll move approval of that.
Well, we need to make the motion officially, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll make the motion.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I have no problem.
Commissioner Privett's moved to approve of the calendar with the with this amendment that the June 8th meeting be removed.
How will that affect the filing deadline? Somebody on
I'm
staff
curious
tell
about
me.
that. Now that I can't, that's above my pay grade. JJ, Sarah, Jeff?
Will it just eliminate the corresponding deadline, or will it, what
It
will?
would just eliminate that filing deadline for that meeting. We'll
and
just
so
skip one.
We don't care about that.
No.
That's internal. Okay.
So the motion again is to adopt the 2023 meeting schedule as amended. It's been seconded by Commissioner Powers. Please cast your votes when available. And the motion passes. We're now in line for the appointment of a Planning Commission member to serve on the Board of Adjustment. Commissioner Privet has so kindly, graciously served as our representative on the Board of Adjustment for how long?
4 years, I believe.
4 years. And we are grateful. So in the pre-meeting, we had a discussion about this. And part of that discussion was, are there other, how we discussed whether it's important for us to always have a planning commissioner on the Board of Adjustment. I have heard from previous commissioners who have
in our
served,
bylaws.
that includes Commissioner Powers, who served on the Board of Adjustment. I'm not sure, were you ever on, Commissioner Hinkle? That there's I've heard that there's a lot of value
There is.
to having a commissioner on. One of the suggestions that, I mean, obviously the ordinance as written requires us to appoint somebody, so we're going to today.
We have to do it.
We have to do it, but I do think it's important for us to consider what our options are, because while, you know, Commissioner Privet has been so gracious to do that for us, it is a time-consuming commitment already to be on the Planning Commission. So one thing is for us to consider changes to the ordinance and the value of that, and maybe that's something we can include in a future study session. I know we have 1,000 headed our way. The second thing is to consider a more regular rotation of who our planning commissioner is that serves on the Board of Adjustment.
Yeah, it's a year term too, so, you know, it's up to that person whether they want to go farther than a year or not.
Oh, okay, so it's
Yeah,
been
it comes
it's a
up
year
every
term.
year, yeah.
So we discussed the possibility of, should we rotate on a more regular basis? That maybe there's, I know I see Commissioner Powers going, I don't know, just hear me out.
Okay.
Maybe we move to a 6-month rotation for us, and then everybody takes a turn. And we just all, you know, when your time comes up, we could swap with each other if we needed to. If you have a particularly busy 6 months coming up, maybe we do that to be fair. But Commissioner Noble has has also graciously agreed to serve for at least 6 months of this one-year term. But I'm throwing it out there to discuss how we might consider handling this in the future.
The only thing I would say about that
It's a learning curve.
is 6 months, you're just now starting to get comfortable on that board. And after that, it becomes, a lot easier to field the cases and know what you're looking for. That's the only shortfall I would see, for sure. And then, if you go through and everybody serves their 6 months and then they start going again, we'll start picking it up. But that's my only concern.
And I think that's valid. It does take a while to get used to it, so I would assume.
What does staff think?
Well, and I'm not sure can you hear me on this?
We wouldn't be able to do that without
I'm not sure
changing the
that we can
ordinance.
do that. I mean, it's not really specific, but I mean, of course, you could always resign.
Just
and somebody
resign, and
else-
then we just come back to this meeting and appoint
Yeah,
somebody.
appoint somebody else.
Yeah.
But I've just never seen it because it's usually appointed for a one-year term for the Board of Adjustments term. But
I would strongly urge us to stick with the current system because 2 reasons. First of all, membership of the Board of Adjustment is nothing like the commitment that you have on Planning Commission, time-wise. The meetings go much quicker, the agendas are much shorter.
Most of the time.
Most of the time. And the agendas are much shorter. And because there are sort of very specific and rather strict limitations on the criteria for the grant of a variance in that context versus this context, there's a lot less wide-ranging discussion about various things. But there is a learning curve to it. It takes a while to get your feet under you on the Board of Adjustment. I think I served 5 years. And, it was not, of course, I understand that unlike most of you, I don't have like a real job that I have to show up for
And I
Monday
didn't
morning
until
at
about
8
3 months
a.m.
ago.
I mean, I don't have something I'm taking time away from. Even when, my children were at home, they were in school during that time. So Thursday afternoons, it was just every Thursday afternoon instead of every other Thursday afternoon for me. And I know that's a little bit more difficult for some others. But I really think the year term is sufficiently short.
Okay. I think that makes a lot of sense to me, and maybe we just see how you feel.
And I think Nate Claire is really, really lucky that Don Noble stepped up.
Absolutely, because that was going to be my next move, to be quite honest. If Don had not agreed, I was going to recommend Nate and then wait for him to come and resign.
In
So
planning
from that,
commission fashion, that's what we do.
that is, if you're not here,
Not here, that's why you don't miss a meeting.
That's exactly right.
So I think what we need now is just a motion we need a nomination for Commissioner Noble to be our representative to
So moved.
Okay. Yeah, second.
Commissioner Powers has moved to nominate Commissioner Noble to be our representative on the Board of Adjustment. It's been seconded by Commissioner Privet. Please cast your votes when available.
After this vote is over, I'll tell you how many items are on the agenda for next week.
And the motion
It's
passes.
going to be a lot like.
I think we're in line for
Planning
item,
Commission, I
we
think.
do still have one more item, and I think that's item 9. We were never able to get to.
Yeah, that's right.
So, is the applicant present for item 9,
Okay.
PC 10847?
We're going to move approval of item 9, PC 10847.
But you do want to move approval without the applicant?
I'm sorry, did you say approval? I said continuous.
Oh,
Continuance.
okay, you want to move? So the motion is to continue PC 10847 to our next meeting of the Planning Commission.
That's good for me. I mean,
It's good I don't know what the date is.
I can look it up.
November 10th.
November 10th.
That motion's been seconded by Commissioner Govine. Please cast your votes when available.
I guess I would ask if staff will contact the applicant, and thank you.
Excellent. We have
3:30.
We have reached the end of our agenda.
Isn't that weird?
Dramatic
Commissioner Govine, did you
effect.
vote?
It's something very specific that I was going to say.
Okay, there we go. And that puts us at the end of our separate items to be heard. We're now in line for, are there any additional items? There are no additional items. Communications and reports, Planning Commission committees. Do our committees have any reports? We're now in line, seeing none, in line for Planning Commission members. Commissioner Powers.
You know, I was just telling Commissioner Fraley, I absolutely had something that I wanted to say, and it's just gone. I have no idea what it was, so I'll have to tell you next time.
Okay, we'll look forward to it. Commissioner Fraley. Commissioner Privet.
Good.
Are we having a reception after for your end of your reign?
If anybody wants to go help me pick up a go-kart frame, that's where I'm headed.
Oh, that sounds fun. After, okay, call me when the go-kart's put together.
For Christmas, yeah. Got about 2 months to finish it.
Okay, invite me over after Christmas. Commissioner Hinkle?
How do you follow that?
You can't. Commissioner Govine? Commissioner Noble? Commissioner LaForge? I have no comments as well. Planning Department?
Just a quick update on the code update. So next week, we will be having stakeholder advisory team meetings about the code update, and we'll be covering the urban medium zoning districts, starting with single-family style districts. So we're excited about that. We've been working on that and doing a lot of public engagement this summer. So it'll be an introduction to the stakeholder advisory team. And so more to come on that. The other thing is the sign code was not quite adopted. You may have read about that or heard about that, but we'll be working with the mural.
Not quite adopted is very interesting phrasing.
Yes. It was close.
Almost, not quite. There you go.
So we'll be working with both the ACLU to address their concerns, and there were some mural artists that came forward kind of in the last few days with some concerns. So we will be addressing both of those, and we'll be taking it back to the council, hopefully early next year.
How long have we been redoing the sign code?
2 years, 8 months, 7 hours, and 47.
I think that's about just
That
about
sounds
right.
pretty accurate.
At
It
least
was
2
almost
years,
more fun
yeah.
when we had to just deal with the protests, like, rather than deal with this. But, oh well, hopefully an end is in sight soon.
It's an interesting reminder how complex these issues really are. They're so interrelated with the zoning code generally, and you know, business interests and small business and large business and constitutional issues. I mean, it sounds really straightforward, you know, we're just going to do this or we're just going to do that. It's tough.
Complicated.
It's complicated. It really is. And I thought of what it was I was going to say.
Okay.
Speaking of traffic, that's what it was that set me off. Traffic calming in particular. There's been a finalization of the traffic calming toolkit, and I would really like for staff to come present to us, and not at a meeting, at a study session, because that would just be like this time next year on the list. But I mean, just to come and give us a little, you know, 25 words or less. Here's the deal. And I think it's going to be enormously helpful to have that as an option.
That'd be great.
Yeah, we will.
And they've been working on that longer than the sign code, by a long shot.
Yes.
So.
Sometimes I've had to answer the question, can we get speed bumps? Speed humps soon, maybe?
We'll be happy to arrange that, and we actually, Public Works and Planning have been working on installing some of that. There's a new, on Villa Avenue from 10th to 23rd, a bike facility project, but with that, we'll be using some of these new, not new, but newly authorized, I guess, including speed humps or speed cushions and several other methods. So, yeah, we'll be happy to arrange that.
I think they're going to give a presentation. Is it to the Traffic Commission of the, here it is, it's done, here it is. And I would just love if they'd come and give us that same, here it is.
I agree. Thank you. Any other comments from commissioners? Municipal Counselor's Office? Citizens to be heard? It looks like they're anxious. They're right standing by the door. They're ready to go.
We're ready to bolt.
Right. Also, can we like make it so we just do all of Mark's cases in a row and then do all of David's? Did you notice how they just kept switching like back and forth, you know? Or do you all like the musical chairs thing?
Tag team.
Be some kind of favoritism or something else.
It's a tag team thing.
It's a tag team. Okay. Other business, seeing none, having reached the end of our agenda, the Planning Commission will stand adjourned. Love it.